hello. Welcome to another
Hello.
epic understanding conversation. Hello, Tony. Hello, Erica. Hello, George. Hello, Lusic. It's good to have you here again and to talk again about epic understanding about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the third part of this conversation, and I think it's good to talk about this. And thank you for being here. And I'm going to send the word to this way to Erica. It's up to you, Erica. Thank you.
All right. So, welcome everyone. I am your host, Erica Atkins, Coach Love, with another episode of Epic Understanding. And we are finishing our third series, our three-part series, actually on diversity, equity, and inclusion done right. Obviously, the world itself is having some growing pains, and it's showing up in particular areas, particularly in the workplace. So today I have for you Mr. Tony Alexander, diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. I have for you Miss Lucic Gas Payan. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion activist. That is a she is all about
Practitioner and activist, yes.
yes, practitioner and activist. And I also have for you today George Leno. Now he's the vice president of human resources at Volunteers of America Chesapeake. And so he is going to bring us a really bright and fresh perspective. He deals with these issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, we're going to put George on the spot, guys, because if you remember, we left off one of the questions in our last episode was if diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a part of human resources. George, what say you?
Ooh, okay. You come right out punching. I love it.
Yeah.
I think we've had our so my name is George Leno, the Vice President of Human Resources and Administration for Volunteers of America, Chesapeake and Carolinas. We are one of 33 affiliates of the National Volunteers of America. What be interesting to know is that people don't know for sure that Volunteers of America is actually a Christian church without walls. So sometimes people look at the name and they think it's about volunteers. It really isn't. It is a religious-based human services organization that caters to those in need, and we are located in 33 different states nationwide. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion practice is one of many affiliates that are adopting it within their own organizations, as each affiliate has its own board and its own leadership. So it doesn't all boil up into one organization. It's like many different organizations, but we have our parent organization that kind of like feeds into it. So I just wanted to put that point of clarification as I'm answering this question.
Okay.
Each affiliate handles diversity, equity, and inclusion differently. So for our affiliate, I handle Vice President of Human Resources Administration. I oversee technology, human resources, and organizational development. The discussion has been, where does diversity sit? Does diversity sit in HR and becomes a part of the HR components as it relates to recruitment efforts, affirmative action, EEOC? Does it sit in organizational development where it becomes a part of the culture and enhancing the culture of diversity and the culture of inclusion? Or is it an overarching by itself where its own unit kind of like feeds into the many different aspects of the organization when it relates to culture, HR, finance, support units, programs, and services? So for us, those are the questions that we're looking at. Right now, where it sits as a part of HR, but it's treated separate in as far as it relates to our organizational excellence unit, because it does tie into the way that we care for our individuals, the way we care for our staff, employee engagement, how we respond to the people that we serve, and understanding their cultural differences, their social economic differences, as well as their racial ethnicities and how they practice. So it's a kind of 50-50 split, depending upon what the issues are and how we are tying them to the overall organizational strategic plan. So bottom line, it's in both areas.
Mhm.
But even further, it's embedded in our culture. So it has a strong place in our organizational excellence as it relates to our development of our organization. It is a foundational component. It is not a program that HR manages, but it's a culture enhancer. So it sits at the growth of the organization.
Okay, so that is a fantastic answer, but still, we didn't necessarily get a yes or a no. Like, where does it belong? Okay, I'm not going to nail you down too much because I believe the answer might be it depends on the organization. You know, with your organization, you all have folded it within the essence of the culture. So it is within the bones, structure, and lifeblood of the organization. So therefore, it is throughout the organization. So it is part of every department, period, end of story.
Correct.
However, exactly. So, but when that is not the case, when that is not the case and your organization is struggling on outcomes, you might need to think differently. Now, this particular episode, part 3, is all about self empowerment. The fact of the matter is, if you don't happen to be a part of an organization where diversity, equity, and inclusion is a part of the bare bones of the organization, you are going to have to do things differently, and you are going to have to think differently. Marco, I'd actually like to go ahead and put up this video so we can get a thought process of, HR and how it kind of operates sometimes not in the way that we would prefer as employees. So let's take a look at this.
Hi, I'm Tara, not the HR lady. And I've been complicit. I have done things I regret on behalf of my company. I have swept stuff under the rug because I was asked to. I've kept my head down because of fear. I've been complicit to injustices in the workplace, and I'm admitting it to you. Have you? The key is to stop. Stop doing it. Say no. HR was largely invented to keep companies out of trouble, to mitigate risk, and it is still that to some degree. I've written about that before. What HR isn't is a place to house all of your naughty company secrets and expect that we're just going to comply and keep them. Sorry. Never will I ever sacrifice my integrity to placate a company, a CEO, an executive that's engaging in bad behavior and help their problems go away. And listen, stop asking us to do it. You put us in a really weird position. We are not Ray Donovan. If you wake up with a dead prostitute in your bed, metaphorically, don't call HR and expect us to bail you out, to somehow ensure that this doesn't go anywhere. We still have to look at you every single day and think, fuck, I saved this asshole from a dead prostitute instead. What am I doing with my life? That's not the kind of fixer we are. You don't pay us enough, frankly. Until next time, I'm Tara, not the HRlady.com. Follow us, won't you? Bye.
Want more? Go to now.
Right on the head, nail on the head, getting to the bottom line of what we are discussing. So, wait a minute. Did George cross his arms?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Look, he is not here for it. Okay, we're gonna come back to that. Lucid. Help us tease this out. What are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, a lot of thoughts. First, just giving shout out to not the HR lady. She's a dear friend, and I loved it. I saw the video yesterday, and it perfectly addressed a big concern about HR, which is HR. Yes, it has human resources in the title, but at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, HR is there to protect the company. And doesn't matter how you look at it, if something goes wrong legally, HR is going to be there to protect the company. And what is wonderful about the video is she's addressing to like what level some companies expect HR to go to, and what can HR itself do with complicity. So yeah, from my perspective, that is something that I always keep in mind, and that's the distinction between HR and a DEI role, and why I think DEI role should not be in the same department as HR is because they have completely different values in a way. Well, not values, I would say. They have completely different people that they report to. One reports to the company, and I would hope that diversity, equity, inclusion person reports to everybody because their job is for diversity, equity, inclusion of everybody. So that's where I see that conflict between HR and diversity, equity, inclusion role in the department. And of course, as George says, you want diversity, equity, inclusion to be within in every single department, but you also want someone to kind of have a handle on the situation and make sure that that's being taken care of, especially when it comes to human resources having so much power and still having to report back to the company and having to protect the company. It's just such an unfortunate position that we put human resource representatives in. Erica, you're muted.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lucic. You made some excellent points there, and basically gave us the conflict in between human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion, because one is responsible for the corporation, and the other one is responsible for the people of the corporation, and that's every single person there. So, Tony, let's just take us where we need to go. The bottom line is sometimes you're not going to be in a company that has a proper representation when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what are some strategic steps? What are some tasks? What are some tactics that a person can use in order to make their career go forward?
Well, the first thing, or definitely that I want to say is that first we have to realize we're all humans, right? And that we have to walk into the situation with an open mind. And I definitely don't want people to take this the wrong way, saying, hey, open mind, we have to forget about the 100 years or so of discrimination and the things of the past. But when you're trying to put yourself in a position and roll out tactics, or you try to really push the envelope on diversity and inclusion, then you have to create a clean slate, and you have to make sure that everyone knows that this is about everyone being treated fairly and equal. And so once you can get that process done, you then kind of remove the focus around the protected class and begin to bring in everyone. So once the organization can see, okay, so everyone is being treated fairly and equally. So it's not just because the color of my skin, it's not because of my ethnicity, it's not because I'm a female, because I'm a male, it's because it's the right thing to do. And so we have to understand, as humans, we're going to make mistakes, but we definitely can't keep making the same mistakes over and over. We've scratched this surface. So definitely now is the time, not only just to raise our argument, but to raise our voice and to put things into action. A couple of things that I definitely would recommend is being very strategic in how you represent diversity, not only internally to your internal customers, but how you represent it to your external customers. And when I mean just go in very vigorously and making sure that literature that you circulate around your organization, make sure that it's very diverse, that it is representing. I mean, not only to the point where it's Black History Month and we're going to put up a nice display somewhere in the break room or something like that. Let's make Black History Month 365 days a year. So let's talk, let's keep that conversation going in general. And those are something that ERG groups can do. And speaking of that, companies need to step up and foot the bill for these groups if they really want to see movement in that. So getting these groups of people together and talking to senior level management in order to get these types of things done as well. One of the other things that I truly love and I always recommend is conduct a resume analysis survey. And what that is getting with your human resource department, getting with your DE&I department, and being able to see, because first we have to understand there's already a bias when that resume lands on the desk, and you're automatically categorized as male, female, Black, white, whatever the case may be, just based on your name, right? And so
Mhm.
so now you already have that bias and you don't know if your resume is going in file 13 or if it's going there. So I always suggest party auditors on that, and that's something that you can suggest for that, and say, hey, let's look at the amount of resumes that were actually submitted, and let's look at it and rank them by gender, let's rank them by race, and then in addition, let's look at who was hired. Like, so, what were the qualifications? What are the different qualifications between the 15 candidates that we threw in file 13, which we can't do because of law, so we should be filing those away. So I have to do that disclosure. But and then make an argument about it, what you're going to find, because you'll be very surprised at the things that you truly find. And I don't even call that unconscious bias. That's just bias flat out and open. Um, and in addition to that, support projects that actually portray the positive images of diversity in your organization. So whether that's, busting stigmas around, LGBTQ, women in the workplace, and don't just circulate it. I mean, make it like a living and breathing document within your organization, because if you're doing it internally, it's not going to really help, because you need that external factor as well, because you want to be able to draw more people. So whether you're advertising, diversity needs to be in your ads. Whether you're out in the community, diversity needs to be in your boardroom. So just strategic tactics, and don't be afraid to ask why. So if you're in an organization and you don't see people around that look like you, ask why. All right, because we talk about human resources, and which is the truth. They're there for the company. But if you bring up that question to HR, well, why aren't there a lot of women in XYZ positions? Well, guess what? The first flag, and being an HR practitioner and D&I analyst, the first thing I'm going to say, uh-oh, we got trouble, right? And and that's why I love not the HR lady, because unfortunately that's kind of what made me leave corporate America, because I was the standing lone wolf for a very, very, very long time, and I pushed on these issues. And with everything with 2020 that happened, like my blessing is just seeing people actually start to wake up. And I won't say people are fully woke, but just the fact that they're starting to wake up. And I'm like, wow, what if I was back in corporate America still with these same things? But I also sit back and I reflect and I say, I just wonder what they're saying now. What if we had just listened then? We wouldn't be in this situation. So again, diversity, look at it from a disability standpoint, and then go to supporting those events that are actually supporting it. You know, you find people, you have, you know, pride parades, you know, you have all different types of events. Have your company represented in there, not like a token, because one of the things that we're going to talk about, you know, or I'll mention real quick, diversity gone wrong, is definitely Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and I think everyone possibly heard about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, so you know, that's a token, right? That's not taking the time to do the research. So make sure when you're circulating these things and you're doing these initiatives that you have that solid person, and you are empowered. You know, be passionate, be stubborn in your approach and your methods, but be flexible as always with an open mind. So those are just a few. I have a toolbox full of things, but I know we have only a short amount of time, but I could talk about this all day. But I think as an individual, it's up to you. It's like being the long nut. And if you're the long nut for so long, eventually you'll gather followers and momentum will take off.
Okay, very, very nice. And I'm so happy you went there because I was so going to go there. Because for me, when I was listening to you speak, Tony, this is what I heard it from a particular perspective, and it was what to do when you're the token in the room. That's just what I heard. That is what I heard. You know, don't be the empowered token. Make being a token a tool. And I know that sounds very funny, but sometimes and frequently, you are the only woman. You are the only person of color. You are only the person from the LBGT community. I'm sorry, Q community. You are that person. And so, George, I want to know, what have you seen executed, specific tasks that you have seen executed from individuals that may have been absorbed within the bones of your organization or any organization that you've been connected to in a successful way?
So first of all, I want to thank Tony for sharing his perspective. I can understand that there have been many times in some organizations that I've been in that I pretty much checked all the boxes and I'm the token in the room. So I get it. But also I agree with Lucette regarding her perspective on it's a human component. It should be divided. It should be separated. So what are some of the things I've seen? I've seen very well executed affirmative action programs. I've seen those come into play and people using the data from the affirmative action program to modify, improve, or pursue the standards so that they can actually hire more people with disabilities or veteran statuses or women, minorities, and things of that nature regarding the roles. I saw people really execute strong EEOC models where they do a lot of advancement and career movement. They establish things like performance management programs or management development programs or what we call emerging leaders, so that people can be prepared to take the next level or the next role. Those are great retention tools for folks so that they can stay with the organization and continue to grow. We happen to be in a time where, outside of COVID, but we happen to be in a time just before COVID where the average stay of an employee was probably about 3 to 4 years. And they were on to moving on to something else. And if you were a minority person, you probably had a shorter span of maybe 2 or 3 somewhere in there because you were looking to grow quickly because you probably was not going to have that capacity in your current organization. So you jump to an organization, you learn something, and then you move on to another one, you learn something, and you move on. In the spirit of COVID and the state of the nation, it's actually reversed itself. People are staying longer. And there is this need, recognition for minorities and people of color and women to be recognized in their organizations and given more opportunities. So I've also seen where compensation policies have changed to talk about compensating people where there are gaps in leadership and people are stepping up, that the pay equity gets distributed a little bit better. The treatment of whether you're a female or male, it's not the issue. the capacity to handle the role becomes the issue, and that's what you get compensated for. Titles and linear and succession planning and career laddering has become another successful thing that people have been moving through. So I've seen a lot of them. Regionally, what I've also seen too is a strong effort to attract people who speak a different language of different cultures. So, for example, you look at me, I am a Black man, but I'm a Black man of Hispanic descent. So I also speak Spanish and I speak French, and I have no problems acknowledging my TQ participation. So, and I'm over 40, so I hit all the check boxes. So I get it, But at the same time, I pursue other people like me in the organization so that there's a community that gets developed because they see others like themselves. And when you're at the very top, people always want to look at the very top and see themselves reflected in the mirror at those who are in senior leadership and the board chair and things of that nature. The last thing I want to consider is how well boards adopt their DEI initiatives at the board level. And I've seen a few organizations do that very well. My organization in question is doing that very well, from my opinion. But Tony could probably look at it from the outside in and say, "Hey, you could do this a little bit better." Hey, and I'm going to leave that out there because it's not about seeking perfection, but it's always about getting better, right? Because when we seek perfection, we will always fall short. We will always fall short because the only person that's perfect is God, and God is not in this world, but He is in our world. So we need to remember that perfection is never obtainable. Its only ability to be better is what's attainable. And as long as we do better tomorrow than we did today, then we're good. So my board has taken the initiative to really pursue a very strong DEI perspective in its structure and making sure that it's meeting those expectations as well. Do I believe in the HR lady and her model about what she talks about?
I knew we were going to get some. Come on, George.
I think when you take on this job, you are, your first and primary role is to manage the risk of the organization. That is at the end of it. And to Tony's point, somebody walks in my office and they talk about how come we don't see this? How come? Yes, that is a red flag. And I need to be prepared because I don't want to deal with EEOC complaints. I don't want to deal with lawsuits because that sucks up the resources. So HR doesn't need to cover up anything. HR needs to make sure that there are processes and practices and investigatory methods to unveil things so that they can be addressed. It's not to hide it or to put your dirty laundry in my department so I can handle it, but it's more so if it's here, let's uncover it and bring light to it so that we can fix the problem instead of putting it underneath the cover. And so in that vein, where she talks about, I don't personally follow that philosophy. That is not my philosophy about hiding things. My philosophy is, how do I manage the risk of the organization? Who needs to know? How do we put this forward? And how do we address the issue? Because organizations that are not transparent with their problems, they're the ones that are finding themselves in lawsuits and things of that nature. Organizations that don't speak about their issues and don't talk about their shortcomings and don't really put forward where the challenges are, they're the ones that are constantly getting hit in the head with, how come you're not addressing these issues? And so I'm very proud of my organization and my leadership team and my executive senior leadership team for always putting forward, let's address the issue, let's not hide it. Because when you hide it, that becomes a bigger problem. And then you got to do more cleanup. So that's how I feel about the HR lady. I may go on and check her out and see a little bit more about what she's saying. Because she's friends with Lustig, I do want to see what she's trying to say. But I'm like, Tony, don't come in my office unless you're ready to fix the problem. Okay.
There we go. But you want to know what, George? Your organization is HR done right. So you're doing it right. But the fact of the matter is there are so many who are doing it wrong. So Lustig, even if you have a HR department that's doing it right, or whether they are doing it wrong, give us some steps. Give us maybe 3 ideas that can empower a person to equip HR when there is trouble afoot.
Yeah, equip HR or equip the person?
Well, actually, in equipping the person, you're going to equip the HR department to advocate on your behalf. And the reason why I phrased the question that way is if the HR's department job is truly to defend the company, and then you realize that something is being done to you that will ultimately harm the company, if you collect the proper evidence, then you are actually empowering HR to ultimately defend, protect the company from the internal predator. Okay. So, or the internal practice that is causing harm to the organization, even though it might be satisfying someone, it is not you who have noticed the problem who's causing the problem. It is the problem itself. And so, from your perspective, you might say defend the person, but I'm going to say the health of the organization is ultimately the health of the person as well.
So I'm going to address the tips I have, but before going into that, I just want to make sure that anyone that's listening that doesn't have had the like amazing experiences with HR or hasn't had amazing experiences with companies. I mean, we saw literally Pinterest story just come out and how ridiculous that is. So I just want to address that point that like we're not gonna always get Georges. We're not always gonna get Tonys. So I think it's important as an individual, as a person that's underrepresented in your organization, to advocate for yourself. And of course, do your job, stay on the path of your career and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, keep in mind that you're the one that's going to advocate for yourself. And I want to repeat my point of HR responsibility is to manage risk and to think about the Pinterest story. I mean, two Black women got 1 year severance check. How much of a risk management was that? I mean, it was managed, I guess. And then there is another white woman that gets 2.2 million. How many million? Sorry. Exactly.
You're right.
So, I mean, the risk was managed. And of course, the HR person is not the one that decides the settlement, but the HR person is the starting point. So I just want to make it clear that you're not always going to have the best experiences, and you need to advocate for yourself. So from that point, my tips are, if you are underrepresented, let's say you are the only person with disabilities in the organization, find someone that's a person of color. If you're the only person of color, find the only LGBTQ community member. Make those friendships with other people that are underrepresented in your same organization. And this is how work groups get started, which eventually turn into employee resource groups. And that's when the power starts going to the underrepresented groups, which now all together are not necessarily underrepresented because they have power. And can actually have a full voice in the organization, and can go back to HR or their DEI person and say, this is what the organization needs. This is the stuff that we've seen. And if you're somebody in the organization that doesn't see your CEO at all and you can't voice your concerns, that is one way you can make that happen. So that's my one tip. Second tip is find an ally, but like white allies are great in an organization. And I've had really good experiences with white allies in organizations. So if there is someone in your organization that you trust and you feel like, they are a true ally, not that they claim that they're an ally, but they are an ally, um, let them use their privilege to support you, to help you claim some of that power, to claim some of that space, and maybe even help you with voicing some of your concerns with HR, voicing some of your concerns with management. If in the meetings you feel like you're constantly being talked over, guess what? This is where your white ally can support you in claiming the platform and gently handing it back. So that's another tip I would have. And then finally, going back to HR, procedurally, like if you have any concerns, definitely go to your HR representative, but go with all your concerns and all your quote unquote evidence, like any emails, printouts, anything that you can organize ahead of time, agendas, and just really go into the meeting with the seriousness. So your concern can be handled with that same seriousness. And then I would say after the meeting with HR, I would absolutely follow with an email to the HR with a subject that says confidential, outlining what the conversation was, and I would BCC it to my own personal email address, so I have a copy as well too. And I would end the email saying, "Is there anything I misunderstood?" Just to make sure that there is no misunderstanding between the HR person and the individual that has concerns at the moment. And if there is anything, they can address it at that moment before it goes any further. And that is a crucial way to handle risk at that point. Like, go to your HR, take your concerns, but definitely make sure you're going in prepared and you're taking your meetings with your HR seriously. And that will signal to them that that is a legitimate, serious concern. And make sure that you have your email backup and you have any concerns or any misunderstandings in that email, just in case, that can be addressed immediately. So those are my 3 tips.
You know what? That was excellent, Lucic. I did not want to interrupt you once. If you're watching, I hope you had pen and paper. If you're checking us out on replay, rewind and write those things down, because basically Lucic just gave us a self-empowerment 101 handbook and how to move forward. Number one, if you're not being represented, to collect yourself into community so that you have connections and power within your group. Number two, find a advocate and an ally who can speak for you and with you and help you navigate those circumstances. And number three, if you do happen to be someone who's having an issue where you are in trouble, documentation, preparation, so that you can be taken seriously when you do go to your wonderful HR department and hopefully find a George or a Tony. George, what else can be done? Did we leave anything out? Is there a practical tip that you want to add?
I think leveraging your voice. I think whether, as an employee, if you do not speak, your issues will never get addressed. And if you don't speak to your supervisor first before you go to HR, your issues will never get addressed. And I'll tell you why. Because HR, as a whole, HR has the capacity to address issues, but they still have to work with management because they represent the organization. And the first thing any HR office will always tell you is, did you talk to your supervisor? Did you work it out with your supervisor first? Whatever the issue is, Did you bring it to your supervisor first to make them aware of it? And a lot of people, they do a beeline straight to HR when they have a problem with their supervisor, and they never give the supervisor an opportunity to fix it. Sometimes the supervisor's awareness could just be out the window and they didn't even pay attention to it. Something as simple as, hey, you and I were walking out the door and you didn't hold the door for me and it slammed me in my face. And that was so disrespectful and rude. Whereas the supervisor's walking out the door on the phone trying to address an issue, not even noticing that you're behind them. And so what could be a big issue by going to HR and saying I was disrespected by my supervisor because he slammed the door on me, because something as easy as just having a communication with the supervisor and say, hey, when we walked out the door slammed on my face. You didn't even say sorry. And they could just turn around and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were there, my apologies, and move on. And so a lot of things is taking our individual accountability for the things that we do. A lot of times we want to blame the supervisor, blame the manager, but if we read the employee handbook, if we read our policies and procedures, if we read what was there, if we made sure that our supervisors are spending time with us, and when they're not holding them accountable, then, when we have problems, we can turn around and say, we did our part. But if you've never done any of those things and you position yourself to receive things and you don't get them and you don't raise your voice and you don't say anything and something goes wrong, well, yeah, the problem is the company, but it's also you as an individual as well. Because as much as you signed the dotted line on that job description and you signed the dotted line on that credit card and you signed the dotted line on that lease, it is your responsibility to make sure that what's on there is you're being held accountable to. And if you're not getting the resources, that you're raising your voice and doing that. Because you can't sign a credit card and not pay the bill after you use the card. There's no way.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's how you get good credit.
But I hope I hope that in the bigger picture, like a lot of people just don't realize that as much as organizations are doing the DEI and this and policies and all that, I want to make sure that people get it. It starts with us first. It starts with me as the employee. You are empowered. If you don't take those steps to communicate to your supervisor, how are you going to get things resolved? Good or bad organization, it starts with you first.
I absolutely love it, George, because you will have the same problem from organization to organization to organization if you walk around with weak self-operating policies. You must be a leader of one first. Tony, I want to get you in here on this conversation. Do you have any tips or anything that you want to add to these notes that our team has offered?
Well, I can tell you they summed it up perfectly for me. Definitely, the communication piece it's so important. And as George said, you'll see employees immediately do a beeline for HR, and with HR and DE&I specialists, we're technically sitting at the forefront of Cat 5 hurricanes is the way I like to explain it. Like there's just so much going on. And I think it starts with the re-education of those first line supervisors and understanding, yes, we have an open door policy, but still these things are in place so that we can prevent miscommunication, or we can prevent things that are taken away from us being able to deal with even bigger issues, or not even dealing with them, but being more proactive so that these things don't exist. Lucy gave a very great example about, one of my favorite sayings is your documentation is your foundation. So you document, you go through it, and you don't have to wait until you have this big journal of everything and say, aha, here we go. But you make sure if you have a conversation with your direct supervisor and they blow you off, you write that down. This is the day that I spoke to you about X, Y, and Z. If you ask to go to speak to HR and that's denied, you write that stuff down and you keep it, because this is a part of raising your voice. And when things like that happen, we have to think about, in the DE&I space, we call those microaggressions. Those are microaggressions to keep you suppressed. So excellent points from both of you. The biggest thing that I can say, as I work with these Fortune 500 companies, we have a long way to go, because open door policy truly isn't the open door policy. And we want to blame HR, we want to blame DE&I, we want to blame our first line supervisors, but we never look in the mirror to see at what point could I have mitigated some of these things. And that's important. That's a part of empowerment. But on the other hand of that, I want to truly, I want to be transparent and say that the environment, again, you're not going to get a George, right? You're not going to get a Lucy, but the environment has conditioned us to suppress our voice. And now more than ever, we have the ability to be able to speak up, raise our voice, raise our argument, and put things into action. And again, all it takes is one long nut to get momentum going, and we're there. So I would say we are a fourth there, but we're going to get there.
Excellent. Now, I have heard wonderful do's from Tony, wonderful do's from Lucic, and wonderful do's from George. But I am going to give you the don't. I'm going to tell you what you don't do. What you don't do is sit around and join the team of complainers. That is what you do not do. Do not sit around and badmouth your supervisor or the HR department or other people in the department. If you have the ability to spot the problem, you have the ability to create change. So let's just pretend. Let's pretend that you have a boss that is absolutely insensitive. They make racial jokes when they shouldn't make racial jokes, or just absolutely, they have absolutely rude behavior, or they do something gentle like leave people out or let the door slam in people's face. Okay, if you can manage to muster up the energy and be brave to say, he's going to be Tom today. Tom, I notice that you typically leave XYZ people off the interview, off the email when you have after 5 meetings, or when we have happy hours. You know what? Let me do this for you. Let me schedule the happy hours for you so that I can make sure everyone in the department is included. I want to take that off your plate. Very easy. And so instead of coming to your boss with a complaint, come to your boss with a solution, because nobody wants more work. Everybody's looking for a helping hand. And when you do that for your boss, what you've done is send a clear message that I am part of your success and I am part of your team. And there's nothing like having a boss that is also your ally. I know you guys have more to add with that. George, I'm going to go to you.
Well, that right there says it in a nutshell, Erica. I ain't got to say much behind that. The reality is, like, how many times no, I think, that's it as far as like empowering employees, like Lucid mentioned, and Tony and you mentioned. At the end of the day, like, we are all individual advocates for the things that we want to have happen. We pump our own train. And if we have problems with addressing even the smallest things, then they do become microaggression, because people interpret those actions as you being intentional and deliberate. And that might be the case. But if you don't take the steps to even address that question or that issue, or even come up with a solution to resolve that problem that you see visible, then what you tend to do is you become a part of the problem. You're no longer a part of the solution. And I would prefer people be a part of the problem, to be a part of the solution and not the problem. But yeah, I'm with you, Erica. That's fine. I was taught that from the very first time I walked into my first job. Don't come to me without a solution. Come to me, you got a problem, come up with a solution. Now, if you don't accept my solution, then come up with an alternative, because I have now raised the problem that we need to address. And most people don't really want to address problems because it is more work. But isn't that what we do, right? I mean, even in our personal lives, if we have issues, we communicate. If we have problems with stuff, we talk about it. We don't just let a problem fester because it messes with our personal psyche and our whole spiritual sense of things. So why not do the same thing at work? Why not be an ally, have your ally partnered with you, identify your allies, have them partner with you as you address issues versus putting them on the outskirts because you become, and I hate to coin this phrase, the angry black man or the angry black woman in the room. So I ain't gonna talk to you no more. Or she doesn't understand me because her culture is so different. So I ain't gonna talk to you no more. Or anytime you got something to say, I don't want to hear it because you're just bringing me problems versus giving me solutions. You've got to go in internally and check yourself and self-regulate to listen what people are saying and weed through all the other emotional nonsense that comes through so you can get to the facts and really address the issue, or weed through all that emotional nonsense so you can present the fact without it being wrapped up in all of your own personal baggage. Ooh.
I absolutely, but wait a minute, you had more to say? What mic drop? Is that what we're doing? There we go. There we go. Okay. As we wrap up here, I do want to add this particular idea. Lucic said that you should, get allies and create a group. And then I'm going to match this with George's idea. Maybe one of the first things you want to do while you're in that group is go over the employee handbook. How about that for the first activity? Okay. Lucic, did you have any parting words that you want to give the group?
I want to just make sure that the advice that we're giving today is not only applicable to people that are like in their 30s and above that have been working for many years, but also might be applicable to the 19-year-old that might have gone their job for the first time ever and is now having to self-advocate, and they never got those tools and they don't know how to give feedback. So talking about to those folks, one tip I have for you when it comes to working with a manager or supervisor, set the boundary with the manager like from the beginning, which is having one-on-one space or having weekly meetings or bi-weekly or monthly, whatever it is, that you have on agenda every single time, specific space that's just for feedback from manager to you and from you to the manager. So that means you have to give them feedback. They have to give you feedback. So it doesn't make you the bad guy necessarily, because it's just part of your normal procedure to give your supervisor a feedback of certain things they can do to improve or to make that relationship better, as opposed to just, dreading going to your supervisor or your manager or whoever you're reporting to and being like, oh my gosh, like I need to now set up this meeting and I need to have this conversation and I don't know how to give feedback, because that's a whole skill, right? And we've learned that by experiencing it. But I think one way to go around it is just making it a natural process of your meetings with your supervisor. So no one is the bad guy, because it's a two-way street. Both people have to give each other feedback of improvement. Maybe you're only doing it once a month for that feedback. Maybe it's a sandwich style where good, it needs improvement, another great thing that you're doing. There's different styles and you can actually find great templates on it online. So this is just a little thing to make it a little bit easier on you if you're not used to that feedback process of it.
Very nice. Very nice, Lucic. Very nice. What are your parting words, Tony?
My parting word is I think from anything, I want people to remember that DE&I, it's a behavior and not a feeling. And it's a behavior that creates a feeling. So the more that people can understand that, the better that we can move forward with that. And just secondly, I want to talk about, as you spoke about, Tom going into the manager's office and kind of removing those microaggressions. And those are systemic microaggressions that are institutionalized in many corporations around America. So just like those are institutionalized, I think then that we should have systemic, tangible results that help to remove those microaggressions. And what you just did, or the information you just gave, is a perfect example of how to do that. Because what that is going to do is open Tom's boss's eyes, hopefully, and make him wake up and say, wow, okay, if he noticed that, how many more of my employees have noticed that, and curb that behavior? And, and hopefully, if Tom doesn't curb that behavior, Tom realizes that maybe this isn't the organization for me anymore, because things are changing and the cavalry is home. So those are my parting words.
I love it. Thank you. I hope everyone had a pencil and a piece of paper while watching this, because these are practical strategies that you can implement immediately to help change you and your organization for the better. Thank you once again for watching Epic Understanding. Marco Navarro, it's a pleasure to be on your network. Thank you for airing us and being our engineer. You are fantastic.
By the way, it's Marco Novo. Navarro.
You know what? I have been pronouncing your name wrong all this. Oh my God.
No problem at all. No problem at all. So, hope you all enjoyed the show. Next one will be January 21st.
Yes.
Same time. And I wish you an amazing Christmas, even though this one will be a particular Christmas. And also, I hope that 2021 will be way better than 2020 was.
It will. It will.
So, bye-bye to all of you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Stay tuned.
Bye, everyone.